What have you done?
I was going to say, what sort of questions?
Thank you, everybody. Welcome along. Nice to have a bit of chit chat before we started. We have a full list of councillors here, and we have Sonia filling in for Jess in the hot seat there tonight as well. So welcome along, Sonia. Declaration of pecuniary interest, having viewed tonight's agenda. Does anybody have any giving interest there? Thank you. Silence clearly noted. Confirmation of the minutes of the 21st of February 2023. Can I have a move and second for that, please? Councillor Brown, thank you. Councillor Campbell for seconding, thanks. And as circulated and I've taken as read, is there any comment or correction to those minutes? Thank you. I'll put the motion to be accepted. All in favour? Passed unanimously, thank you. And just before I move my mayor's report, I'd just like to acknowledge the passing of one of our four living, that doesn't sound right, Councillor Trinas, does it, mayors, but just thought Eric Clifton Isles, known as Cliff Isles, and 95 years of age, that passed last week, and we had his funeral today, had 30 odd years on the council, 18 of which was as warden, and was the founding chairperson of South East Community Care, 25 years in the Sorell Bowls Club, life member of the Cricket Club, and a whole heap of other things, including a stint in Parliament. He's one of the founding people to do with the industrial relations, was one of the founding board members of TasPlan, which is now Spirit Super. Incredible life and story. He had no time for family, marriage or children, so when you look at the grin on his face, he was a cheeky little bugger right up until the last couple of weeks before he passed in Ghana. So we had the privilege of when last year for our bicentennial, when we had the chains commissioned to record the mayors over the life of this council, that there were four of us, myself, Councillor Trenius, Councillor DeBrassi at the time, and Cliff come along from Ghana, and he was a foot taller that night with pride on having them around his neck, and that was the picture that they used for his funeral today. So just in acknowledging that, is a lifetime of history has disappeared out of this municipality in the last week. So thank you. My mayor's report. Can I have a move and second for this to be tabled, please? Councillor Reynolds, thank you, and I'll take Deputy Mayor as the seconder, thanks, and invite questions from the floor.
Thank you, through the chair. Just a couple of questions. The first one, you're meeting with PCYC and the extended program. Have you had any more knowledge, and would you like to explain what's been discussed so far?
It's been a whirlwind couple of weeks on that. As you know, you have been working on it to get it into the school without a lot of success, and myself as well. Recent opportunity with Scott Wade moving in as the CEO on a 3-year contract with the PCYC, and the fact that it has had administration problems throughout the state for quite some time. A lot of that has been corrected and streamlined now, so I took the opportunity to meet with two of the representatives there, and we are looking at a project to see if we can get funding to call it Southeast PCYC, to cover from basically Swansea to Newbina, Primrose, Sorell, and maybe Richmond. And I was informed this morning that Jess has had a phone call with Scott Wade to organise a follow-up meeting on a few discussion points about how it could happen and how we might pencil it together. There's still a fair bit of work to do, but Jess, who has had a passion for bringing something like this together, and in fact used to work for the PCYC when she was much younger, was very happy with the conversation she'd had with Scott and put some of her queries to the side a fair bit, so there'll be several more meetings. Besides that, last week I attended, and it's listed there, a community meeting with the Tas Community Fund, and they are changing their focus of what and how they fund in the community, and there was an opportunity to put forward the concept of youth development, education and learning, which fitted nicely with the PCYC down here. That had a few hours to do that, and I thank the General Manager and Jess and Stacey for their efforts that afternoon in a very much a panicked environment to get in, at least to get it into the system so that we can have discussions with them about the possibility of funding. So it's been a lot happened in the last fortnight.
I believe with the Tas Community Fund, that's about working in collaboration with other groups too, isn't it, now around that funding? So
funding and other groups to get involved too, just not going to sort of flop money out now for just individual projects. There has to be a lot more coordination through the community in both funding and community involvement. And I think it's a bit fluffy around the edges because it's all happened so quick, but we believe we have the ideas and bones there of something that should be pretty good if we can get to that next funding stage. It has got a fairly high cost involved with it, the number of people that cover the whole southeast, but there's also an enormous amount of efficiencies in how it's being handled at the moment.
thank you. And my second question, I see you're fortunate enough to have a tour of Nugent.
Yes.
What were some of the issues that day that you were going to show you?
I actually had to come back and be very humble about what I learned on that tour of Nugent. It was quite interesting. David, immense amount of knowledge in that bit of his, and one thing I did learn that was practical that we've discussed and is a bit of a do you or don't you is sometimes when we spray the sides of the road and the bank, the vegetation leaves the bank, it doesn't allow for erosion of material in to help fill the culverts, which cause problems then when you have serious rain. So you have to weigh up some of those things. That's something I hadn't paid any attention to before. And even little things on the movement of gravel on roads with heavy transport, which on the corner where I thought it was wearing down. And David actually pulled up and showed me where it was actually pushing out because of the weight of vehicles. I always knew that the mixture of gravels to get the binding agent so it compacted as a solid surface was important, but having understood little things like that with if I can be right to him, an old timer that's been around for a while, there's some pretty sensible points. The other side of it was Hacks Road, which David's raised the point here in this chamber before with us. He believes it's a road the council should be maintaining, but it's not on our register, and it is a Crown Land Reserve, road reserve, got the wording right, which is, they're all over the place. It's no man's land. It's old goat tracks turned into something for farms and that. So once again, it's a juggling act on what was maintained in some way a lot of years ago to what is affordable these days. So it was an interesting trip out through that. One of these.
Always is. Thank you.
That's all right.
Thank you. In your meeting with Treasurer Michael Ferguson, what was the purpose of that and what came out of it?
Two parts of that is that the General Manager and I have worked fairly hard with the present government through the Hodgman and government periods and had if you like, a direct access to senior ministers. And with all the changes that have happened over the last 18 months, and changes in the ministry so often, it is very hard to have those relationships. Now, you can say what you like to a minister or a local politician, but unless you've got the treasurer who controls the checkbook, and they understand the project you're talking about. There's a good chance it's not going to happen. So part of that was to build that relationship with the Treasurer and the Deputy Premier. And it was a very broad general discussion about where we were with some of the projects like the roads, also about what may need to happen, and things like PCYC were on that, and various other small, big, medium, some federal, some state little projects that have been on our list for short time, long term. And that was just about having a general discussion, so we can, at least we can say if it does pop up through one of our local members, he might say, oh yes, I know about that project.
Did you get a chance to talk to him about light industrial land?
The discussion wasn't about planning, but we did touch on it a couple of times, and he is fully aware of that because our general manager and the general manager of Brighton are two of the main people pushing the STCA's funding and planning for the Southern Tasmanian Land Use Strategy to be utilised. So
Just the sliding door slot, I believe, so yes.
until Councillor Prentice comes back. Thank you. Anything else on those orders? No. Thank you very much. I shall put that for acceptance. All those in favour? Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, right.
Yes. I have a question about Senator Wendy Askew, and if you would be so kind to give some comments about that, maybe? Thank you.
Oh, yes, look, the Senate team split up various areas of the state so they're not covering the whole state, although they're senators for Tasmania, they usually allocate different regions. And we used to have Senator Dunniam, then we had, what was it last time? Names escape me now, but Wendy is the senator allotted to this area at the moment. Mental blank. And you don't get to see senators that often because they're usually on national committees running around all over Australia. But she was in the area, so we just had a very general chat about things that might pop up for federal funding or things that were talked about at the last election that haven't come through yet. We did have a fairly solid discussion regarding the blowout in costs of buildings these days and the fact that they really need to have a look, even though they're in opposition, it's still all part of the federal government, at how they're going to fund some of these projects that have got mammoth shortages in funding now. We take the opportunity every time federal, state or anybody who calls himself a politician comes within arm's reach of Sorell, because it is vital that you talk to everybody regardless of party, regardless of whether they're interested or not. We have Senator coming to see us in a week or so. She's been down once before. We found her a very sensible person to talk to, and we asked for her to call in as many times she was in down this way in Sorell. It's important that, once again, that everybody gets the same message and everybody understands what our community requires and will need in the future.
Follow-up question. So Senator Askew, that she has a very strong interest in social issues. Was there anything that she's working on in our region in terms of that? Was anything mentioned, or is that part of the conversation?
No, there was nothing suggested on what she was working on, and you very rarely get that sort of feedback from a senator in opposition, let alone even you don't really get that from senators in government either. The conversation with the senator versus a minister as a portfolio to look after is usually quite different, although we did have Senator Dunniam 1 year was had aged care, so that was appropriate for us to talk about the things like South East Community Care. But it's very rare you get down with the senator to that level of conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there's nothing else, I shall put my report to acceptance. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Thank you. Supplementary items. We do have a supplementary item before us. The sponsorship policy, community recreation facilities, which is 20.1. I have a mover and a second for this to be accepted, please. Councillor Reid and Councillor Trenius, thanks very much. And I shall put that motion for acceptance. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Thank you. 7.0 is council workshop reports. We come to 9.1, which is motion of notice. Councillor Reid, so I take the assumption that you will move this.
I will move
so
the
I'll
motion.
ask for a seconder, please. Councillor Campbell, thank you very much, and open the floor up for discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I would like to update the background. There was some important detail that needs to be added in, and that is in reflecting on marking International Women's Day and the representation of women on council. It's very important to include Sharon Pryor, who served in 2002 to 2006, Judy Young, who served 2007 to 2011, and Robin Bunyan, who served 2011 to 2014, in addition to the details already provided. I'd ask that the background be updated to include those details. And also...
Sorry, Councillor Reid, and if there are others discovered.
Yes, and other details to be discovered.
Yeah, but also.
That's right.
Correct. As your motion, you are able to do that.
Yes. So, and that's just background to the motion. The motion itself, as you can see, is in two parts. The first about recognising the Sorell Community's achievement in electing a record majority of women to Sorell Council, the most of any in Tasmania, and we think possibly nationally as well, but we have further research to do around that. And there's a second part of that, having recently celebrated International Women's Day, to make that an ongoing event as part of that recognition and encouragement of women in leadership in our area. And I was pleased to participate in some events this last International Women's Day with some of our councillors and staff, and also with the wider community through the event that was hosted by BEST and South East Salvos. So we've made an encouraging start this year, and the purpose of my motion is to officially have that recognition and also to encourage that to continue in years to come.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah. Yeah, you have a story to tell. There's 5,670 councillors in Australia. If you take the raw data, 50.9% of them are male, 49.1% are female, and here, 70%.
Nearly.
Male councillors are in danger, aren't they? But what I did notice when we talk about involvement of all sectors of the community, inclusivity, as they say, I look at these names: Vincent, Brown, Woolley, Green, Campbell, Gatehouse, Reid, Reynolds, Terenius, well, Scandinavian, but white as a Viking, right? And only Crusader is only person who's not from the same old cultural mould. There are something like 25,000 people who claim to be Indigenous or identify as Indigenous. This is Tonga-Longa land. We don't have those. So what we're looking like doing, I'm entirely in favour of, we should pass it right now. I don't think it needs to go anywhere else. It's a very good thing, and we'd look terrible if we didn't. But are we in danger of turning a white men's club into a white women's club?
I'll take that as a rhetorical, if you could hear me, Mayor, take that as a rhetorical question and say that absolutely agree with the spirit of the point, and that this is not a motion about being exclusive in any way. It's a starting point for being more inclusive, and as the theme of International Women's Day this year was embrace equity. Obviously, being Women's Day, the focus is on women, but equity extends to all of the being much more representative of our community in a broader sense as well. So absolutely.
I was just being uncustomary, politically correct, but there's a great television story there with Channel 7 News. I mean, this is probably the biggest figures in Australia, 70%.
Which we need to check. Yeah.
Well, I'm really pleased that Deputy Mayor Charles Woolley, former student at Brooks High School, studied hard and knows his percentages.
I'm not very good at numbers, but I got those from a very trusted source.
Thank you very much. Is there any other comment before I put this? Councillor Gadders, yes.
How do you, there's two parts to this motion. The first part, formally recognised, how do you want that to form? I mean, how do you envision that recognition being?
If I may, through the Mayor, in my just simply having this motion on the public record in this meeting is a first step. So we'd had some discussions around what we would do this year at council, and this is the first step in making it official. And then the background to the motion is a beginning of actually fleshing out what that context is, what the facts and figures are, and making some suggestions for what else we may do in future. But they're purely suggestions.
So you're proposing for future discussion on?
Yeah.
Next month. Yeah. Right. The second part, the best event, International Women's Day event, was a really good opportunity for local women to network. I would like to see that continue, and the council partnership.
Yep.
Here, I read in your background and your motion that you would like the council to have an event of their own. I would like to see that partnership and it being a grassroots event rather than a corporate high achiever one.
Through the Mayor, I don't see them as competing with one another. I thought that in the suggestion in the background that a council-sponsored event would complement what Western, the community focus, so that they're not competing at all. They'd be complementing and building on one another. And that's up for further discussion. Yeah. But one of the other things, sort of joining the last two comments, one of the other things that's come up by raising this is the fact that council has no public record or a complete record of past elected members. The research that was done for the mayoral change is the first time that record had been brought together in recent years. So it just highlights that we have a bit of homework to do.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Could I just say, at the risk of conflict of interest here, perhaps council could give it to the Sorell Times to print your motion.
Oh, make a story of it, you mean?
Through
Yes.
the mayor, it's a
Yes.
good story for the Mercury as well, I mean, which is more widely read, and it's a great television story, but somebody's got to write the press release, somebody's got to take the pictures and do some
Sorry,
short
there's
interviews.
technically the motion on hand. We have a motion before us, which has been explained, so I think all those are fine and we deal with after the meeting, whoever wishes to to take that on. I think that's what Stacey's role in the business is, I think, isn't it, for media, so it's good news for them. Okay, thank you. I shall put that motion for acceptance. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Thank you. 10.1 is the departmental reports. Can I move a second for that, please? Mr. Campbell, Councillor Reynolds, thank you. And open up for discussion. Councillor Reynolds.
Through the chair, Robert and Russell and a couple others, you had a meeting with the Southern Waste Solutions on the planning session for FODO. Just, has there been any advancements or?
Through there has. It's a business opportunity that progressing through the pre-planning stages, certainly in a commercial sense, as well as the project itself. So it was an opportunity for the Southern Waste Solutions CEO and operations manager and their business advisor to brief all the 4 owner general managers and just one or 2 additional staff, expert staff from each of the councils. So it was just a workshop session to go through some of the assumptions and to clarify some expectations on timing around potential customers and just the general commercial viability of the project. So it's certainly one which is progressing, and there will shortly be putting it to the board of Solid Waste Solutions to continue into the business case feasibility aspects.
Thank you.
Through the Mayor, the meeting or session about the population strategy, are there some key points or relevance to Sorell that comes from that?
Through the Mayor, there are. It's Department of State Growth. It's their project. I can't think of the actual arm of the Department of State Growth. It's a massive department. But the population strategy that the current state Liberal government released some years ago forecast at particular targets at particular timeframes, and where I don't think in the years ahead we are 20 odd years ahead of where we thought to be at this point in time. So they're revisiting that strategy, and it's good timing having access to the most recent ABS data as well to consider a bit more detail. Just it's not just raw numbers of actual growth, but some of the subsets within that, migration effects, natural births, most births are natural, births as well. So it certainly is relevant for Sorell with the growth rates we've had over the last 10 years at least.
Mm-hmm.
It was more that they presented to the STCA meeting, and it was an opportunity they were seeking sort of targeted feedback from the Southern Councils to that's a range of questions they're asking across the communication channels, so councils, the public, anybody.
Mhm.
So it was the same questions we had. It was quite a useful session.
It was, I'd add to that it was very good to be able to feed directly into the people doing the research and the numbers, and they took everything we raised on board. Having been at the LEGAP meeting last week, not all councils were really interested because they didn't have the growth or didn't really care about some of the figures, but our staff did, and it was a brilliant meeting.
EVs and social services were discussed, as well as underpinning infrastructure.
The big thing is you need those numbers when you go to sit down with the treasurer or any other department head to be able to justify your argument. You just can't say you have to justify with a lot of that research, and the fact that they are doing it and we can use their own data, can't argue against it. Robert, I'd just like to raise congratulations to the finance department. Our rates are above the last couple of years in collection, which makes an enormous difference to council's operation. It's also interesting that the interest in parodies is down a bit too, which although the economy's tightening, people have made the effort to make sure their rates and charges are paid. So it's a significant strong point about our community and work that our officers are doing in getting in before it gets to a parody stage. Any other comments on these reports? Councillor Trini.
I assume this is probably the right place or the right time to ask this. Tree work on page 45. I had a request from a resident as to whether we knew anything about a request to have the trees removed in the car park in St George's Church grounds.
Yeah, through me, the park supervisor who's just this week sought some advice from me on that request that's come from the church, the landowners. So I'm just haven't yet, but I've got all the lease documents and other bits and pieces to go through to see just who's obligated to deal with it. It'd be a shame in some respects that some of the few remaining remnant trees in Sorell are quite for me at least, they're quite a significant part of the overall townscape. But we'll go through a process and either in the sense of, because we only lease the land, we don't own it, as to ownership, what the lease requires, and then the actual health and status of the trees, which I think has already been determined.
I was just going to say, I believe that an arborist looked at those trees a couple of years ago anyway, for safety reasons, but and my next question was, yes, who's going to pay for it if they do have to be removed, because it's not cheap.
No, so through me, I've got the materials, it's going to go through to work out the
Thank you.
state of play, as it were.
If there's nothing else, I'll put the motion for the work group reports to be accepted. All those in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. 12.0 is land use planning. The Mayor advised in accordance with the provisions of Part 2 Regulation 25 of the Local Government Meeting Procedures Regulation 2015. The intention of the Council to act as a planning authority pursuant to the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act of 1993 is to be noted. In accordance with Regulation 25, the Council will act as a planning authority in respect to those matters appearing under item 12 on the agenda, inclusive of any supplementary items. 12.1 is the Sorell Planning Authority minutes. 28th February, I will move, thank you. Councillor Tranius, thank you, and the seconder is Councillor Reynolds. Those minutes have been circulated and read. Is there any corrections, comments? Thank you. I shall put the motion for acceptance. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Thank you. (13.1) Copying proposed rule changes. Have a mover, thank you. Councillor Reid and a seconder. Councillor Brown, thank you very much. Any guys, questions or comments?
Through the Mayor, I think that there's some very competent people obviously working on this, and they're very sensible changes, so.
Our Company Secretary, Karen Pillins, is quite brilliant at doing this, and in the past we've had a team of lawyers do it quite regularly, and things swing around everywhere depending on who's determining things, but Carolyn's point of view, sensibility and commitment to this pulls out quite a few significant and subtle changes, so yes, there is some change to go. There's no other comments on this. I shall put that motion for acceptance. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Thank you. (13.2) is the Sorell Audit Panel Councillor Representative.
The move for this to be discussed, Councillor Campbell. Marisol there, yes. I just asked GM, Deputy Mayor is coming off, do we have a nomination for this, don't we?
No, that's what we need is a replacement. Council.
So,
Yeah,
Kasati, you did send an email through, I think.
Yeah, I
Yes.
did put my name forward, but availability wasn't, so this year it's not possible for me to attend because the set meetings are not able to be moved and my availability clashes with the
Right,
meetings
okay.
that were set.
Thank you, so we'll back to square one. Thank you for clarification. Was that putting your hand up, or sort of remove of the glasses or just about, yeah, it's like an option, you know. Don't flinch. Nathan's too scared to blink.
I'm still.
Yes, I have availability.
Oh, I see. What is the council's content with that nomination? That's it.
I'll just clarify the councillors are content with the nomination of councillor
No.
Kate.
I did mention to Robert that if I can be on a wait list for next year's when there's availability, I would like to join in if possible.
I've never known of anybody going on a wait list for an audit panel meeting.
That's
so
a great position to be in.
that's-
There's
just
always
shows
a
the strength
first.
of this council, yes. We are very happy to have you on the wait list for the audit panel meeting. Thank you, councillor Gatehouse. I'm sure the general manager will just tie the wording of that up, but everybody understands what's just happened, I expect. So I'll put that motion for that to be accepted. All those in favour? That's unanimous.
If I was gonna vote.
Don't vote from me.
It looks good, one against, councillor Gatehouse. Thank you, councillor, that's excellent. 15.1 is community grants program. The mover, thank you. Councillor Casada and Councillor Campbell, thank you. Not sure what discussion, but the floor is open to discussion on this. We've workshopped this pretty heavily, which we normally do. These requests come in spasmodically through the years, so we workshop them and then put them to council for clarification.
Through the mayor, I think, just a comment that the two amounts, the Dodgers Ferry Football Club women's program and the Spirit of St Martin's reflect council support for two new initiatives in the community, I suppose. And congratulations to them.
All right, councillor Campbell, you
In relation to the Spirit of St Martin's, did we discuss giving the whole free of hire, or were we looking at the grant? Because I noticed the grant's still in there. I just wasn't sure if that's for discussion now.
I'll just check for clarification, but normally we don't give the whole other lot. I think it was explained in the workshop, but otherwise you're doing that for everybody and that takes away from what we do. So funds actually go towards, in some cases, paying for that or.
Was that what was discussed? I thought, or maybe I missed the halls, but I thought we were discussing not doing that for all the halls for Anzac Day.
Yes, I think that's what I recall
Yeah.
too.
We already do in most cases on
Yes.
that, yes.
Yeah,
Some for one other than Sorell, and we believe we already do that.
because this grant was for Anzac Day, wasn't it? So that was what we were gonna, yeah, I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. If there's nothing else, I'll put those recommendations for acceptance. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. 16.1 is the executive summary financial report for February 2023 year to date. Someone like to move this?
Councillor Brown, Councillor Merritt-Sober. And open the floor for discussion. Scott must have felt fairly confident in not being here tonight. A lot of detail there as we talk about these funds, that it takes away a lot of the questions because they're so detailed recording.
Yes.
Expect a report, Deputy Mayor, on percentages next time from you.
Yeah, well, I'm not really a numbers man. But ABS is very good at giving you reliable figures.
Councillor Campbell, thank you.
Thank you. So just in relation on page 73, point 5, it's just got these categories about budget, about 206,000 due to 174,000 in contributions due to the subdivisions that have been going on. Will we be discussing further, I guess, with the upcoming budget, what those monies will be allocated to?
So there's an option, and they were listed there under two categories of land sold and the public open space. There are some swings and roundabouts. It's not just a block of money, it's actually has to be in relation to things in that area. So keep with that.
Good, thank you.
That is open for discussion.
Through the mayor. On page 77, there's mention of a increasing budget for Latina Street due to a sinkhole. Is that something new, or that's the ongoing issue there?
No, through the mayor, that's actually an additional requirement or request. Russell has to be here, who knows the issues around that job better than I do, but principally we completed the works to put the outfall in, or upgrade the outfall. And now, as these things happen, upstream of that, there's been a partial collapse. So I'll get Russell talk more fully than I can.
So typically in stormwater pipes, there's a spigot and socket. So on that one, we put it in originally, just butted the pipes up together. Yeah, so effectively what's happened is the water's got around there and now causing other issues. So we've got no choice but from that manhole we put in back to the previous manhole, we'll have to replace that length of pipe with one that's actually sealed rather than one that's partially sealed.
Might be building drop another manhole into one spot, or is it other?
No, it's at every joint in the
Yeah,
pipe.
no,
Every joint on the pipe, yeah.
drop the manhole.
So I hope we haven't got too many other pipelines like that, but anyway.
I hope it wasn't a habit,
Yeah.
just a
indeed.
one-off.
Indeed.
So maybe on the rubber rings.
Yes, we did that.
The sinkhole was developed and Russell was looking into it.
Head first.
Sorry.
Very good.
Thank you. To the mayor, question for the general manager. So in looking at the budget and would it be beneficial, and I think you've mentioned it before, if we get a bit of background information as to how the budget allocation works and how the budget packages are put together?
Probably not relevant to what's in this report now, but we can certainly do that in the workshop, because that will be a major part of, especially with the new councillors on over the next couple of months, there'll be a fair bit of information flow on that. It's important to understand how that's built up, so it's probably not in direct relation to what the motion is at the moment.
Thank you.
I should say through me that we have mapped out the necessary workshops between now and the June council meeting to ensure that both the capital and operating budget preparation not only works from the organisation point of view, but with the council laws as well. They not only understand what's happening, but can have input into particular projects or issues that they're interested in. But yeah, it's quite a detailed series of information exchange and meetings to get it in a position where it's ready to be adopted for June, along with a plethora of other management documents and rate resolutions and all sorts of fun stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, I shall put the motion to acceptance of the financial report. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Thank you. And we move.
So 24.
Oh yes, it's supplementary 24 one, isn't it? Yeah. Oh yeah, the paper page. Yeah. The supplementary one, I think we've all been given the printout of it all, the supplementary item. So can I have a motion, please, to discuss this? Councillor Gadio, thank you, and Councillor Brown. And open the floor to discussion on the supplementaries.
I'd like, through you, Mayor, I'd like to note, not really a conflict of interest, but an interest in one of the parties who might be actually applying or under this policy, being the Bendigo Bank Community Bank. So I just wanted that noted for the minutes. Or for the discussion, doesn't need to be minuted.
Terms are fairly broad and cover off on most of the points that could be of concern. We also draw a lot of information from a lot of other councils, both in the state over a number of years regarding signage, how it works from mainland and state councils, and then adapted to what's needed here. I can imagine we've got to make any further comment.
Oh, there only the policy at the place was quite simple, being that our inaugural sponsorship policy on our community recreation facility. So this iteration is a lot more detailed and a lot more. I mean, the clarity is there for the benefit of the participants, really, who go out and seek the funding and do the work to get it. So it's an overdue opportunity to improve it, but also with the stadium as well, and the whole other element that the prior policies didn't consider. So a whole other scale of potential sponsorship.
I'd just like to make note that in the criteria, we don't include drugs, tobacco, alcohol, but we've also got gambling there, which I think is great because you look at elite sports these days and there's gambling being promoted everywhere. So I'm glad that that's been eliminated.
This is a strange phenomenon in sport that they complain about the effects of it, but they allow it to sponsor. Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mayor. On page, I'm just trying to relate it to what we sent earlier. I think it's the same thing. Anyway, there's mention of freestanding signage for sponsorship advertising. What does that mean? Freestanding signage will not be permitted except where there is no perimeter fencing.
Very like signage boards or the
Okay.
extendable. I get lost. Extendable buttons.
Right. So
Nothing it helps.
on the facilities, it's fixed signage on the facilities, either inside, courtside, that sort of thing.
You touch on freestanding from relevant game days.
There's provision for it.
Okay.
We're not permitting except where there's no good fencing around the playing field or activity area, or extenuating circumstances can make it.
Thank you.
Just a quick question to clarify, thank you. So if the funding goes to the clubs, the funding goes to the council?
Well, through it can be either. So if clubs seek out their own sponsorship, obviously goes direct to them, to those clubs, but it's the only one where it's likely to come to the council directly would be if it's associated with the stadium. At Pembroke Park potentially is probably the only likely facility that would attract that. But I would say 9 times out of 10 it directly goes to the clubs.
So we lend the walls to clubs to seek sponsorship to advertise there. Is that? Thank you.
Could I just ask, will that signage be reviewed regularly? Or I'm getting a nod from Sonia because
From the boss.
there's still signage around the municipality that's
See,
been,
yeah.
been there.
Not even
Outdated.
businesses anymore, yes.
Mm.
Thank you. With that, I shall put the motion for acceptance. All those in favour? Thank you. Now move on to questions from the public. Who'd like to start off? Yes, Toby.
Toby Meredith, I've been widely called Sorell. First of all, I'd like to congratulate all the people that got elected. Takes a bit of guts, I think, to put your hat in the ring and to be elected. I'm sure there's good and bad at being elected. Could I ask, I want to talk about the dog park. Could I ask which councillors haven't seen the dog park in the last month or two? Haven't actually walked around it and seen it? Okay.
The one in Sorell.
Yeah. There's 3,103 dog licences in Sorell, which is a lot of dog owners. The Belrive Dog Park or the Lena Valley Dog Park far superior to what we have in Sorell. The Sorell Dog Park it can be fixed. It needs some gypsum putting on it because it's got black cracking clay and we've got cracks that humans could put their feet in and break their ankle, let alone dogs.
I've got some photos if anyone would like to see the size of the crack.
What it needs is gypsum, and it needs the worst puddles that form in winter filling in, which is easy, a couple of truckloads of topsoil. It needs regular mowing and it needs irrigation. So there's nothing rocket science in this. And I would hope the council would take this seriously and produce a dog park that's as good as the other sporting facilities in the area, because there's really good. Pembroke Park's lovely, the football club, the cricket, everything.
And for anyone that isn't aware,
Excuse me, Stu, just one at a time. Toby has the floor to ask the question or make a statement.
I'll go next. Thanks.
Yes, thanks.
And I noticed the amount of female councillors, there seem to be a few the female dog owners supporting tonight. And my observation is there's more female dog owners come than male dog owners to the park. And it'd be a really nice place if it was green, mowed, and it will fix itself and be something that the council and the people can be proud of in Sorell. Thank you.
Thanks, Toby. Yes, sir.
Just
Just to get you to say your name and where you live, or roughly where you live.
James Cooper, Midway Point. So for any councillors that aren't aware, a petition was lodged last year about mid-year. We had over 150 signatures, all from the Sorell area. We've raised the issues of the dog park for the last 2 years. As Toby's discussed, there's several issues. The major issues are in winter time. There's 4 or 5 persistent dips in the ground that collect and pool water, and they turn into big pits of mud. They've never been evened out. They need some topsoil to level them out, so when it does rain, the water can dissipate and dry off. That problem isn't actually related to the soil type, it's just related to how unlevel the ground is. My dog, for one, gets sick. If it drinks from the puddles, it'll vomit that night. It dug up some mud on Sunday, and I said to my wife, he ate mud today. She said, I'll sleep downstairs, and he vomited in the lounge room downstairs. It happens every time he drinks that mud. There's several other dogs it happens to. Then between winter and summer, there's an OK patch where there's no mud. And then summer, it's large gaping cracks, grass seeds, fuzzies, it's dry. Grass seeds are horrible for dogs. People can get really expensive vet bills from grass seeds. They get lodged in their fur, in their ears, in their noses. Just last week, there was a 90-something-year-old lady there with her Maltese Shih Tzu, and she had a walking stick, and she said, excuse me, over the fence. She's in the side bit. She asked me, when's the council going to fix these cracks? Some of the cracks are this big. My dog's left with a limp 3 times this summer. He's a Kelpie. He needs the space to run around. And I'd like to reiterate that it's a facility for people and dogs. The dogs don't take themselves there. It's a recreational facility that's extremely beneficial for mental health. There's a lot of people in the community that meet each other that wouldn't have otherwise met each other from all sorts of backgrounds. It's a place where people discuss community issues besides at the council. And yeah, our response from the petition was that at the moment it's up in the air whether the money is invested to improve the facility or it gets moved to Miena, where I'm sure it would cost even more to redo the facility. But in the interim, we haven't been given any solutions. At the last meeting, it took all winter until the end of winter, the council came and dumped some sand on the mud pits, which could have been done as soon as the petition was lodged, and it wasn't. And now we're back to the same issue. We've got these cracks, which are really dangerous, and we're going to come into winter again. The water's going to pool. We're going to end up with these mud pits, and a bunch of us have got utes. We could fix it. You know, half a dozen guys with utes could do a few trips, bring soil and grass seed. The council could fence off some sections. You don't have to fence off the whole place. There's just a few persistent patches. And I mean, it's become a bit of a meme, so to speak, at the dog park. How hard is it to get the council to maintain a field? How hard is it to get 4 holes filled? And everyone's unhappy and complaining every day. And I don't even have time to be here. I work in the evenings as well as during the day. I've got a project due tomorrow, time's money, but I've come here because this is an issue and people care about their dogs. They're part of the family, and I think it's just been brushed aside as this thing that, you know, maybe some councillors, I can't speak for any individuals, but they don't want to deal with it at the moment, and I just don't think that's good enough. And the community really cares about that facility. And I've mentioned it in the petition, parents come, they bring their dogs, they let their kids go to the skate park, but they can make sure they're safe and keep an eye on them from the dog park. There's elderly people that are within walking distance to the dog park. If it moved to Miena, that would be a different story. I'm not against Miena, it's a nice area, but I know it will cost a lot of money for that to be done. And if it is decided, I'm sure that's not going to be for another year or so. So we'd like to know what the solutions are in the interim, and we'd like to see the council being a bit more proactive about it. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Jane. I'll ask the general manager to comment. We didn't ignore the petition, and we did table the response to the petition back through the next council meeting with some costings, which I'll hand over to the general manager just to cover those points and what we may be able to look at.
So it was, yeah, you're right, it was August last year when the petition came back to council for further consideration. We did some costings on between capital or operating budget expenditure to improve the range of factors with that dog park. Was in the vicinity $50,000 to do it properly. And we also looked at the longer term use of that area. If the facility was to be relocated to Moana, it would add around an additional 20,000 to that to do it properly. It was considered as part of this year's mid-year budget review as a new project, but we just were over committed on other projects already, so it will certainly form, and this is in terms of an upgrade, it will certainly form part of the preparation for next year's capital budget. But operational or maintenance matters, I should say, there's certainly been some stuff done. It sounds like it's not sufficient from the feedback, but I'll talk to staff around that, and happy to talk to either of you as the sort of go-tos, if you like, around anything we can do in the interim, but also to keep informed about what happens with the more significant improvement either to that side or to the different side of Moana. The reason I refer to Moana Park is we have a master plan document we've done for Pembroke some years ago, which has evolved, and as more facilities get built there, it's necessitated the consideration of repositioning some aspects, which is why the dog park may actually be longer term better off at Moana Park, pretty much opposite the depot effectively. But it hasn't been resolved as to if that's going to happen or when, but it's effectively a budget consideration for next year beyond routine maintenance, which we're obliged to do anyway, so that I'll deal with the relevant staff. We'll be back in contact with you about that.
Do you have no details?
No. Oh, I have your address, but that's all. I don't have a contact number.
We'll get that before you finish, and Toby, I've got your details, and I think the depot has too on Nancy's.
Because I just asked, a figure of 50,000's been quoted, which I think is way above what's needed if it's done by a local farmer or what actually needs doing. Is there a breakdown of this figure of 50,000? Because it seems incredibly excessive.
Yeah, I do have that. It's probably need to debate. I'm happy to talk to you about that simply rather than debating it now.
Yeah.
We've got the breakdown.
The figure is based on Toby, we've done a lot of work over the years with those sort of soils. And the experience in the depot was based on, I think that day that Mandy was over there with us walking around looking at it, she'd make a comment, it doesn't matter how much you skip down those holes, it just keeps taking you. There's a few changes you've got to make to that sort of soil and the matter of the culture altogether, the organic matter in the soil. So yeah, it was based on council having to do it, and that's the way it's got to be done. You just can't allow any members of the public to start carving soil in, or what it is, weeds, everything like that. There's a lot of reasons behind it, but the general manager's happy to talk to you later about that. You will get your details. Yeah.
If you decide to move it down to Moana Park, there would still be the same problem because,
That's correct.
yeah, so you wouldn't solve anything, plus you've got the
Sorry,
oil to
we're not having a debate on this. The
No,
question's
no,
been
sorry,
answered, so. Right, anybody else with a question? Sharon?
One quick question, perhaps you could answer in which century the government hopes to start work on the infrastructure between the airport and Sorell. We were told it was going to be finished by 24 originally.
25.
Hasn't even started.
No, there is things happening in the background. You appropriately asked this question, Sharon, because it's been frustration. The federal funding said that, as I've always stated in this chamber and outside, that the project needed to be finished by the end of 2025. Unfortunately, with all three of the four segments left to do, which is the golf course and the two causeways, they all have issues which are a federal issue with the EPBC, which is Environmental Protection and Biosecurity, whatever they are. Biodiversity, which is a process in itself. I did have a phone call late last week from Sarah Casey, who is the person working for Pitt and Sherry, who are now have been appointed by the government to do the design work. They have contacted Russell to organise a meeting with engineering staff to discuss some of the aspects, and a couple of those things they'll be looking at in the next couple of months will be the Aboriginal middens either side of the causeway on this end, as well as one evening they will do some core sampling of the road to see what's actually underneath the road and how good it is or how bad it is, so they can start doing design work. It is too early to have a start date. If you look at their website, they are saying 18 months, but they're hoping to do it much earlier than that. That's
So they have
all we
pushed
know
out the
at this
overall
stage.
date, 2027, if you have a look, Sharon, from
Yeah.
2025, because I said to them, you haven't updated this, and the next thing was, it clicked over 2 more years.
So we've also asked for some information at an appropriate time, which is a bit hard to determine, sort of in 2 or 3 months' time, I say that little bit of knowledge. They'll be able to give us a much more defined timeline. And Sarah has agreed that regular updates to the community needs to be back like it was with the other projects that's been missing for the last 12 months. And that included that only by accident we found out that it had been delayed because Russell saw it 6 months ago on their website, and not even the general manager of Main Roads realised that that had been added to the website. So,
Can I ask what's happening with the golf club? Are we losing the golf club? That all of a sudden went quiet, that one, they were going to take everything from the golf club and then just quiet.
no, they had various options there. Basically, I don't think this has changed, but they were going to have to redesign. I think it's the 16th that runs down along.
Yeah,
Side road.
16th we changed.
And they'll change that, and the dam that you can't quite see off the road, change it to allow for the appropriate road and that to go through. So that's been negotiated for several years now. There is, every time you have a change in committee and people, I think there is more arguments thrown up. I think largely they've determined what they need to do and how they need to do it to keep the golf course there.
Thank you.
What happens in the future, who even knows?
Thank you.
Hugo and First Avenue, as everyone knows. I was going to mention something about the potholders not getting any bigger, or should I say getting any smaller. And I'd like to keep on sort of be on your toes, so you will be Tasmania's answer to Sorell when you wish. Right, I'm concerned not only about the Bunsey, but also the large gum trees that are on the edge of the bank and along First Avenue. If the trees decide to blow onto my house, it will be destroyed. I've had several branches, twigs and things that bounce against the house. One of these days I feel that it's going to come through my front window, and I don't know what will happen to everything on the table and me. What concerns me is that kids walk past there. Now on page 45 of the minutes we have here, it says the heading is land improvement. Ongoing mowing and maintenance for parks, reservations and walkways. Given there is actually probably an unofficial walkway through there, the school kids do go along there. Now the gum trees do have a tendency to drop their branches. My neighbour next door, who is fortunate to only have one tree in front of her house, recently had a gum tree, a branch drop down. Now if any of those kids get clobbered, I don't know whether they'd survive, and I'd like to know who has a duty of care, because so far nobody seems to own this strip of land, which I keep banging on about all the time, since 2018. So is anything going to happen? And does ongoing mowing and maintenance concern that particular walkway?
No, and through the mayor, it's not council property, so we're not maintaining it. Certainly the property the walkway, that leads from First Avenue between 1921 to that parcel that is ours. We're required to maintain that, but the foreshore property, if you like, isn't. Which is why we don't do any maintenance there or do anything with the trees.
So should I have to fork out of my pocket to get rid of those dead branches? I mean, I'm on a pension, I can't afford it. I am trying to get some quotes just in case My daughter-in-law, who's a lawyer, is going to shut me up. I'll try and pay for it herself, just to keep me quiet. So if any contributions from you lot, I'm more than happy. But I mean, if any of these branches drop on a kid, I mean, somebody's got to answer to that. And the last time I spoke with public trustees, the name of Albert Reardon popped up. Now, I don't know whether Albert's still alive or not. I don't know where he's come from. I haven't followed him up yet. The other is just sort of a compliment here for those councillors who did turn up. The Sorell Reads was very successful, and I believe 800 people plus, including councillors, came through. The other is, I'm wondering how many times you have to have a consultant to talk about the beautification of Sorell, which is what I'm trying to say this afternoon. I mean, my understanding is this guy, I can't think of his name, came here.
Peter Kenyon.
Yeah, came here, obviously made a report. What happened to the report? He went back, and I don't know what's happened since. And I know we're looking at streetscapes, but what about the beautification? Is there anything to attract tourists here?
That remains to be seen. The report has been tabled. That's the initial report, which is broad, as I explained this morning, and part of the budget process is looking at the cost of what it takes to do the next step. And purification can be separate to what we do on the ground, or it can be the same subject. It can be taken all into a whole. There is a lot of precedence of numerous municipalities being bypassed like ours in Tasmania and on the mainland. The reason we had Peter come over is he's not the design person, he is the concept, and he gave us several concepts. He also gave us several people to contact, which the general manager has been doing, put it into the budget, which will be considered for the next year's discussion. That discussion then will involve with whoever we have to do it, the business houses, the community, the council, and anybody else that needs to be involved, probably including the government. Of course, parts of our roads through our township are still controlled by the government as well, so consideration to a lot of different factors have to take place. And as was discussed in the morning, just because one person or a group of people see murals or mosaics or whatever it may be, there is also not everybody agrees on those things. So that's why the consultation has to be timely and broadly, so that everybody gets a contribution.
Just a question, the police station, the old one, what's happening with that? Who owns it?
So the state government do, discussions are taking place on the possibility of what may happen with that. There are several people that like it as development. There's a few other options available, but nothing's been fully discussed or openly other than an initial conversation about what might happen with it.
I'll close on bone seed. Is anything going to happen?
I don't think there's any bone seed at the police station.
No, I know this one. It's in First Avenue. And I have a new best friend here in Charles who has also been bothered by bone seed.
Yeah, he's got to come down and pull it out, I think.
Now, we're going to work together.
I was pretty sure I heard him say that.
Bone seeds. At midnight. Thank you.
Even dusty will go off. Yes.
Hi, Susan Lassie, I live in Lewisham. I've got a couple of questions, and one which is just as I was sitting here. Lewisham, Townsend Lagoon. Are you aware of Townsend Lagoon?
Yes.
What is happening that all those dreadful tyres are being put in the lagoon over the areas that the swans nest in? And it doesn't seem to be being stopped. There's swans that every year come in there and build their nests, and there is now a great big row of tyres all the way along there, and the property that's next to that lake is gradually creeping up and popping up.
That issue has been raised several times from both councillors, council staff, and several members of the public. It is a very awkward process to, it's not quite as easy as just saying stop when somebody's doing something illegal like a field. Some photos were sent to the general manager only a couple of weeks ago where they were levelling out that fill again, and if you look there is more loads being dumped in the last week.
Yes.
So I'll flick to the general manager to give an update on it, so I'm not sure the update in the last fortnight, but yes, we
we don't agree with it happening.
Well, the thing is, apart from anything else, apart from the fact it's unsightly and it upsets the swans, at one stage, sometime last year, about a year ago, we had quite a large fire spontaneously combust up on the hills behind my house. And it was like being in Apocalypse Now. I had two helicopters going directly over the top of my house, picking up water in buckets from that lake, which they were able to get up and suppress the fire, which was about 20 feet from houses. So that is actually a useful thing, apart from the fact that it's the logical area for water to gather, which is all the runoff from all the hills around it. And this guy is just building up and building his fires and creeping acquisition, from what I can see.
Generally,
Like, I'll have to take it on notice to some extent. I need to talk to our planning manager around the operation of the planning scheme as far as, I'm reasonably confident that sort of activity would require proof, but I need to confirm that that's the case. And then from that, what we can reasonably do or not do under the planning legislation and the enforcement provisions of that legislation. So, we've had some dealings with the owner on and off over a few years, but it wouldn't appear to be resonating, so we'll need to consider this in a lot more detail. And I'm happy to, if you want to leave me a number, I'm happy to liaise with you as to what the outcome is, but it's frustrating.
it is very frustrating.
It is very frustrating.
I'd
Okay.
say in planning matters like this, when we have been forced over the last 10 years to take it to court, it can be years before it gets looked at, mainly because they don't see planning matters as a major thing that they need to deal with in the court system. So although the person might have been told to stop, and we use every way of doing that open to us, it can still take a very long time.
Yeah, and he's taking a
Frustrating.
very short time.
Frustrating for us
Really
too.
build it up. Yeah, and the other question I had was, of course, about the Quarry Road, Fawcett Road corner, the old Fawcett Road corner, if it could be looked at properly, please, because that corner is dangerous.
Yeah. Just before you go, there was raised about the awkwardness of slowing down and getting around the corner with the traffic coming through from both directions. Russell, just catch up with you and just get your details and just have a quick chat about how you view the corner. You've got a better idea, because then you can talk to our engineering staff or whoever else is appropriate as well.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
No worries at all. If there's nothing else, thank you everybody for your attendance tonight. We've got a little bit of closed session to move into, so appreciate your questions and yes, and we'll follow up, and you're welcome to come along anytime you like, as some of our other members do, keep firing questions at us. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Kind of very nice.
Really have to slow down virtual scale. And there's a drop just right there.
So to watch and.
It's the right turn. There were about 10 cars behind me because they said to slow down. I had my indicator on and I started to pull out, and luckily I looked at my vision because somebody had pulled out to the right of all of those cars and screaming down the hill. And the girl actually had that happened and got around.